me being young, I obviously watch a lot of the Marvel movies and all of that. And I love the way they've represented Wakanda in their films.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you're aware of this, but Black Panther. Have you?
Yeah, no.
Yeah,
It's after the Black Panther came out,
yeah.
the African Americans kind of empowered, looking at why
Exactly.
can't Afrofuturism, right?
Yeah,
It's called
Afrofuturism.
Afrofuturism.
Exactly.
Right.
But what I'm trying to refer to is not the after effect of the film, but just the way the film was made.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at it, the way they designed the towns, the way they had their whole costume made up,
Yeah. The
the
hut
way,
and art
the
system.
hut system,
Yeah.
but it's a multi-story thing. Or they had these markets, their Ar Santes, they were
Yeah.
showing it up
Markets,
there.
yeah.
You know, the people are thriving on that. They were showing all their indigenous artifacts. They had kings who had those very traditional ornaments that they were wearing, and it wasn't seen as something to look down upon. Rather, it was celebrated in the film, and that was brilliant for me. Like the whole concept
Oh,
that there
it
is
kind of
a.
had an influence on you. And,
It did. I loved that movie just for the fact that they were representing this so-called third world country
yeah.
as one of the superpowers of the nation, but I mean superpowers of the world, but they were still so rooted in their culture, which was beautiful for me. I mean, that whole vision was amazing for me. I was envisioning that for India. People feel like if you use Mangalore tile, if you use mud, if you use red oxide, it just signifies that you're poor, which isn't the case, which absolutely isn't the case, because it is only natural, it is only practical to use these materials. Why are we exactly having this complex where we are trying to associate this with poverty or this with something low quality, and everything imported is of high quality, everything abroad is great?
Things may change if rich people, elite, would start using when these
They do.
materials.
So that is another topic
Same thing
where
happened with the potato in Europe, right?
I would love to use mud in
Okay.
one of my projects.
So
But
you need a solid research on material research, material
material
science point
research
of view.
exists. That's not really a issue. The willingness of the people isn't. I mean, because they've lived in homes which are made
So
of mud for long
wouldn't you
enough.
like to build your own studio from out of mud?
I am planning on
You're
doing
planning
that.
to build a
Yeah,
studio out of
yeah,
mud?
yes.
Okay.
So that at least goes to prove to people that
Mud
listen.
sourced from the same place
Yes,
or bought it
yes.
from somewhere
No,
else?
no, no, no.
Oh,
From the
that's
same
going to be
place.
beautiful. It's like
Yeah.
solid extension from the
Yeah,
ground itself.
ground
Right?
itself, from where it stands.
Nice.
That is what I strongly believe in. Like buildings must be rooted in where they stand.
Hey guys, if you like our content and if you would like to support us, please make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. Now let's talk about Sampreeth as an architect.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm pretty impressed by the fact that. Okay, by the way, this Sampreeth studio is called Design Neralu. Sorry, Studio Neralu.
Studio Neralu, yeah.
Studio Neralu, sorry.
Yeah.
And it is situated somewhere outskirts of Mangalore, in the place of Hebri.
Hebri, yeah.
So it is around like 60-70 kilometers from
Yes.
Mangalore,
Yeah.
and pretty close to very outskirts.
Yes.
Like it's pretty rare to find an architect who studied in a good college or anything. I mean, an architect.
Yeah.
Like getting back, like finding a studio space, not in the
Yeah.
city or urban place,
Yeah.
but in the rural space.
Correct. Yeah.
So, what is the logic or emotion behind this decision of setting up your studio here, and also your journey to start a studio like Studio Neralu? Why?
So like I said, my alma mater is Manipal School of Architecture and Planning,
Okay.
and I was born and brought up in Bangalore, right? So I am as urban a kid as one gets, and I did all my schooling there as well. But when I did move, and it was circumstantial, and my parents had enough of Bangalore, and so we decided to move quite quickly away from Bangalore. And that actually is not a planned thing, in the sense that I had nothing to do with that. It was more circumstantial. And then when we did move, we didn't move to another urban place, but we moved to a very rural farmland, which is a 5-acre property. You can imagine somebody who's grew up in a urban scenario with more density, more people, is very active, hustling and bustling, right? And you come down to a place like this where you can hear the crickets singing.
Probably right now. I think it's
right
picking
now.
up probably in the mic.
And you can hear yourself just think.
Yeah.
Because there's so much silence. There's nothing happening. 6 months when I came down here was horrible for me because nothing, right? And power wasn't even a thing then. Like power was there, but you had way too many power cuts and things like that. No internet, 3G, 4G. You can't engage with social media as you do today. So that really forced me to rethink a lot of things, and then comes Manipal, where I'm going to study. So I kept going. I was a day scholar, so I kept shuttling between Hebri and Manipal. So 8 hours in a day I'm in Manipal, 2 to 3 hours, maybe 4 hours in my home in a village. And Manipal is a very cosmopolitan place. So you can imagine that whole dichotomy is also adding to this whole
private island, I would say.
Yeah, pretty much. And you can imagine what would happen to somebody who's just thrown into a village, which is a new environment, and then now they're being pulled into a very cosmopolitan town again. But in a day, I'm seeing both sides of the face for the next 5 years, 4 years at least. So that really, for me, I always joke around that, it's almost like I had split personality where I'm in Manipal, I'm this very urban kid conversing in English because it's very multicultural also, right? You have people from all over the place who are coming to Manipal. So you're engaging in those conversations. You're talking about international politics. You're talking about international architects and architecture and all of that. And then I take this 1 hour drive where I'm like essentially changing my personality as I come by.
Back to Narnia
of sorts. I'm engaging with Awana Sande, Chande and all that once I'm back here, right? I'm engaging with the rural folk who are my neighbors and that sort of a thing. So it was a really interesting period for me. I consider myself lucky that I got that opportunity where I could engage in two worlds, two very different worlds. And so I think first 6 months were horrible, but the next 3.5 years was bliss. Because if I have a design block, let's say, and I'm designing something, I would take a walk in the farm. I had 2 pets. I still have them. So I would take a walk with them, go around, come back. I had a river next to my property, so I would go sit there. I'd go sit under a tree somewhere. I had the small forest patch that we have right here. It's called Kumki. So there were huge trees. There still are huge trees in that property. So I would be fascinated just seeing. You don't see all of that in Bangalore or Manipal for that matter. Humongous trees. That branch itself is thicker. Just the root itself is thicker than me. So just that fascination, and then you'd come back. Then that whole sensibility also changed for me. As an urban kid, I'm thinking in a very different manner in terms of problems, in terms of facilities, in terms of resources, in terms of my worldview. But when I'm in a rural place, my entire worldview changed. Right? I kept, for example, you would think not having internet is a big deal in a city. That it is a fundamental infrastructure that one needs to have. But come to a village like this, electricity is even more important. Roads are important. Community spaces are important. People are not interested in which is the biggest shopping mall you have closest to you. Where is the metro here? Where is the auto rickshaw stand? That's not a thing that concerns people here. So, and even proxemics was something that changed for me as to an urban to a rural place. So all of this really influenced me as a person in those 4 years. And those 4 years are really crucial for anybody who is growing up, right? Between 18 and 22, I would assume, are like your formative years in that sense. You're becoming an adult. You're trying to find your place in the world. Understanding yourself. You don't know anything about yourself at that point. So you're learning, you're exploring, experimenting. And I go through this for 4 years. I then moved to Bangalore for a couple of years. I do an internship and a job with Gayatri and Namit Architects, and I also get mentored under Namit Verma, who's one of the principal architects there. And he also really changed my life in the sense that he really exposed me a lot of different thought processes. He also somewhat falls in the same school of thought as Vijayanath. He's one of the students of Vijayanath. So that's when I said I'm a student of a student in that sense. So he was really a guru to me, and he really guided me, exposed me. For example, we used to go to this man from Finland who was growing peanuts in Tirunelveli. Why is this man who's from Finland, who's well off, he's probably an aristocrat or something, but he's come to Tiruvannamalai, he's walking around barefoot in a Maruti Suzuki Eco, and he has this black Labrador. And we are like, at the end, I mean, when we visit him, he takes us to this lake. We sit in a small hut next to the lake where we are drinking coffee out of these mugs that he's carved out himself with his own bare hands, right? With a piece of wood, he's made these two beautiful coffee mugs. You can imagine, for somebody as young as me, getting exposed to experiences like that really changes your perspective on things, about ego, about spirituality, about philosophy. There's so many aspects that really changed for me in the 2 years that I was with him. Eventually, I think that also pushed me to kind of move out of a city, because in the city I couldn't find a lot of those aspects that I wanted to address. And it really was bothering me that in villages they are emulating cities, and me being in the city, I was really stressed out and really depressed in that sense, the way they were building. It was very haphazard. Everything is about commerce. And I don't know why people worship cities in that sense. It was
How would you envision a village
a village, I would say.
as an architect?
See, I'm not against development. I want people to have the best of infrastructure. But what I wanted for my village, let's say, or for rural India, was to have something indigenous. Let's say, I'm going to slightly digress, but I have this vision for the country, which I think is in parallel with the Mahatma Gandhi's philosophy, which is decentralized system. Start with the grassroots, make them independent, let's say a Gram Panchayat level. You have village industries, you have employment here, you have education here, you have everything here. Somebody who wants to get employed has enough opportunities as well. So nobody's actually looking to go to a city to find a job, to find the better quality of education, whatever it is. People are happy the way they live. If that's the case, if a village becomes self-sufficient, and every village becomes self-sufficient, can you imagine what the kind of country we would be living in? Right? So that is what I envision for a village in India. Correct. Why aren't we looking at that? Why are we looking at the centralized model that we are only a small part in the economic chain, whereas we have every potential to become take the larger share of the economy. Today we are more of an agrarian society. I'm not against that. We don't have to have a shopping mall in Mudradi. That's not the point. But what I'm trying to say is, have the best infrastructure, have fiber internet, have the best roads, consistent electricity, have an industrial area here, industrial park, which is sustainable, ecologically sensitive, but it caters to the people, right? It could be, let's say, to give you an example, there is a community here called Malekudia community, who are an indigenous community, tribal community in the area, who are skilled in basket weaving. Okay. And weaving in general with cane and with any forest produce, even with twines and twigs and things like that. So my point is, why can't we have a cottage industry just for them? I'm not talking about large scale industries. I'm talking about small scale cottage industries. Why can't we have them producing, let's say, rattan sheets, which can be used for partitions? Why can't we look at lampshades being produced? Why can't we look at n number of things, right? And baskets, for that matter. Kitchens today have these baskets, wicker baskets. They're storing onions and whatever. So why can't we kind of have that, where at a village level there is a tribal person producing this beautiful product, handmade product, which can reach somebody else and be used, and you're interlinking the commerce, the consumer to the sort of B2C sort of a thing, or C2C probably. So why can't we look at that? So that really enables the community to thrive. Today, what's happening is today the guy makes a basket. There's nobody who wants that basket. And eventually his son or his daughter is going to be like, why would I want to do that? I would get educated. I would move out of the city, find a job for myself, have my savings, buy a property in Bangalore, 20 by 30, the thing, the rat race. They want to go into the rat race. I'm saying break the rat race. Break away from it and let these people have a dignified life. Why can't they stay in their villages, have a dignified life? So that is what I envision for, rural India and my village. And when I kept looking at people emulating and looking up to cities, that they were the in thing, it just was very sad for me. I was like, they are not aware of what happens when they go to a city. You would have a salary, let's say, of 20K.
Yeah.
Starting off. Anybody for that matter, 10K, 20K. You are ending up spending 5K on residence there, minimum, small place, PG, let's say, maybe up to 10K now, with food and all of that. What are you left with? What will you make a life out of living in a city in that sense? And they struggle and slog away for what? For their villages are not going to improve. They have to come back to the same place after all that, right? Rather, if you have enough opportunities here, if you develop a more local economy where they are able to fend for themselves, they are able to thrive, they are able to they don't have to make millions of money, like you don't have to make lakhs, but it's not even required here. You can have a good life with just a little bit of money, right? So, but if they can make that much that they don't make in a city, then that leads to a completely different lifestyle. I always think, it's probably a little silly thing to say, but me being young, I obviously watch a lot of the Marvel movies and all of that, and I love the way they've represented Wakanda in their films. I don't know if you're aware of this, but Black Panther.
No.
Yeah.
It's, after the Black Panther came out,
Yeah.
the African Americans kind of empowered. Looking
Exactly.
at why can't Afrofuturism, right?
Yeah,
It's called
Afrofuturism. Exactly. But what I'm trying to refer to is not the after effect of the film, but just the way the film was made. If you look at it, the way they designed the towns, the way they had their whole costume made up.
Yeah. The hut and art system.
The hut system, but it's a multi-story thing. Or they had these markets, their Ar Sampreeth, they were showing it up there. The people are thriving on that. They were showing all their indigenous artifacts. They had kings who had those very traditional ornaments that they were wearing, and it wasn't seen as something to look down upon. Rather, it was celebrated in the film, and that was brilliant for me. Like the whole concept that there is
kind of had an influence on you.
It did. I loved that movie just for the fact that they were representing this so-called third world country as one of the superpowers of the nation, but superpowers of the world, but they were still so rooted in their culture, which was beautiful for me. That whole vision was amazing for me. I was envisioning that for India.
Okay.
Like, why can't we look at that for India, right? Why can't we feel empowered? To give you another small example, I'll be brief, but can you imagine us wearing mundu, right? Mundu, basically, and having your everyday life in the sense, not just at home. I'm talking about official wear, where your DC is doing it, where your politicians are doing it, where your people are doing it, people in the commerce are doing it. I'm just giving you an example. Isn't that why are we so reluctant to wear mundu out in the public? We do it if it's a function, if it's like some this sort of a thing, but like of traditional attire, we only see, okay, that's traditional, it's only meant for traditional occasions. Why isn't that our everyday life. So in that sense, I've started buying khadi. I wear khadi shirts, and I have a
Nice. You
bag
have
which is,
fully kind of embraced
yes,
the
I'm
living.
trying to. I'm not fully embraced it, but I'm trying to see what are the aspects we can address.
Interesting.
Yeah, so if you look at that, then villages become empowered. We have our own independent system in place where we have clean drinking water, we have beautiful homes to live in, um, we have beautiful educated people, literate people, but it doesn't mean they have to go get a job as soon as they get education, but
Yeah.
rather they're growing their own food, living off of the land, but at the same time they are able to read and learn and probably write their own literature. They can, like I was telling you the other day, we are the ones who need to have our own history written. It shouldn't be the case that somebody else is writing our history. And unfortunately what's happened is that a lot of other people have written our history because we weren't literate enough to do that, probably, right? We feel very low if we are trying to express ourselves maybe in Tulu or expressing ourselves culturally. Somehow people feel like very, uncomfortable doing it. It's much in the same way. That's the same logic that happens with a lot of architectural buildings as well. People feel like if you use Mangalore tile, if you use mud, if you use red oxide, it just signifies that you're poor, which isn't the case, which absolutely isn't the case, because it is only natural, it is only practical to use these materials. Why are we exactly having this complex where we are trying to associate this with poverty or this with something low quality, and everything imported is of high quality, everything abroad is great?
Things may change if rich people, elite, would start using when these
They do.
materials.
So that is another topic
Same thing
where,
happened with the potato in Europe, right? Like
yeah,
a potato, nobody ate it
yeah,
until there was a famine.
yeah,
King had to address the famine issue.
yeah, yeah.
So the aristocrat at King's Court told King that, like, let's start eating potatoes.
Okay.
So after seeing the royal eating
Ha
potatoes,
ha ha.
everybody started
So
eating. That's
eating.
how
Oh,
potato
I
like
didn't
get
know
into.
that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right now we have French fries, we have many things, but
Correct.
potato wasn't.
An
Yeah,
edible
edible.
staple.
Yeah, it wasn't considered as edible.
Oh,
Yeah,
I didn't know that. That's
it
interesting.
always starts with it's funny how people behave, right? In order to change people's behavior, people look up to someone
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that's always the case. Elite kings,
yeah, yeah,
celebrities.
yeah, yeah.
So if there is the adoption from their side, then it will follow down the
Yeah,
line.
it'll
Yeah,
trickle down, is what
yeah,
you're
yeah,
saying.
yeah. So if you like, this is my observation in sociology. Like I did read quite of books on sociology, because at one point I was interested in how to change the world, like how to change people, not change, yeah, how to change people's behavior, which is very difficult. Like there are set of principles in sociology. I can recommend that book.
Sure, sure,
That
yeah.
book is called The Influence, written by sociologist. Yeah, one of them is one of the strategy, like since you are focused really on changing the village or perspectives of people on village, I think applying some of the sociology aspect in your architecture would really help.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I
absolutely.
think this can make an like this
I
is how
will
you can
definitely look it in.
change people's
I look at it. I look at it.
perspective and behaviors. Yeah.
That is interesting. I agree with you there in the sense that it does come top down,
Yeah.
it does trickle down. But I've also seen the opposite happen in a sense that whenever I say, let's do Mangalore tiles in wood, and they're not completely wrong there, but they're like, oh, no, that is a rich person, thing. We can't afford that.
Okay.
That also happens. There's a tag on it automatically that, oh, that's the rich people doing it, we can't afford it, let's not go down that line, that sort of a thing. So it also works the other way around sometimes, but I totally understand what you are saying.
Correct. How do you approach the design process when you're working on Tulu architecture? So, what are the techniques and tools that you use in the design process?
So it of course starts with asking the client for what it is that they are looking for.
Okay.
And it also is important for me to understand what the site is like and where the site is.
What do you see in this site?
So when
Aerial stuff or
so I look at the extents of the land as to
Okay.
how big it is, in the sense, because the larger the footprint, the better I can spread the building a little bit. So then I can bring in the landscape into the building. Ideally, I try to do that with a lot of my projects. I look at that. I look at the natural features of the land, which is the slope of the land, the lay of the land, where are our trees, is there a water body close by, is there some other feature, other stones on site. I tend to see them as also my clients.
Okay.
Might sound funny, but
Stakeholders.
they also seem to be the stakeholders, because a piece of land will have like creatures there, like snakes and birds and other creatures staying there. So I need to understand the environment I am invading. In that sense, as an architect, I am giving a proposal which is going to really disturb them. So I have to understand these sort of aspects. So studying the site becomes very important. Studying the client becomes very important. And when I have one-on-one interactions with them, and their sociology really helps, because I ask them a question, but I'm more interested in how they're behaving than their answer. Right. So I look at the behavioral patterns of the client. I'm having easy flowing conversations, or it's really to do with the questions I throw at them.
Do they have Tulu design in their mind like that?
A lot of the clients who approach me already know that I design buildings which are native to the area.
Tradition in mind.
Yeah. So they approach me with that in mind. They want that sort of a building. So it's really not very difficult for me. I don't have to go down to that point where I have to convince them to build this. They approach me with the idea in the first place, so it's much easier for me there. Although at times I've had people come to me with the right intention, but they've never expected what's going to happen next. In a sense, they would think it would be simpler, or they would have a different idea of what would happen. And as we start the process, then they change their mind, which becomes very difficult. But anyway, that is the client interaction part. Then I come back to my drawing board. Now I have the site data, I have the data on the people, the clients, and I also need things more practical, like how much are they willing to spend, and how many people are at home, and who are they, what are they doing, why are they doing what they're doing. I need to understand all of that. What is their culture? Even community actually is an important question I address. What community do they belong to? Some people might find that offensive. I used to be like that as well when I was urban kid. But once I've moved to rural India, I've realized that it is important. Why are we saying
community is important in
see, certain communities have certain behaviors, right? Let's say they have larger social gatherings, let's say a certain community. If I were to take your example, I understand you're a Christian, yes. So for Christmas, you would have larger gatherings. That is only specific to you, not just you, Clinton, but your community. I'm only not looking at you as an individual there. I'm actually seeing you as part of a herd, which is your community. Of course, you have you have a pluralistic society today. We have communities from everybody, every community interacting with each other, but there are certain behaviors which are specific to your community. Right. I would go on in the sense now, Subodh, for that matter, who's a mutual friend of ours, I know he belongs to a certain community. I know this is the lifestyle they have. So then that helps me give an insight to not just him as a person, but his family and his social group. Then I understand what are the kind of spaces they require, So I take that into consideration. I actually see that as a very relevant point. It is not really to divide people in any sense, but only to cater to that. Because culture and community are very intertwined. You can't have one without the other.
True.
Right? So how could I say that I am an architect who is studying culture and taking cues from it for my architecture if I'm not looking at the community aspect of
So
it.
studying culture locally is really important to design
Yes,
it for
yes,
that, right? Okay.
because the context and people will have cultures. And for me, honestly, we have in architecture what is called like these quotes, like architecture follows something, like form follows function,
Yeah, yeah,
function follows form. There are people who say less is more, there is people who say more is less,
yeah.
and all those sort of thing. But I honestly believe form must follow culture,
Mm-hmm.
you know. That is my take on
Okay,
this
that's your
whole.
philosophy of your
In a
studio.
way, yes, it is, because if I'm talking about, and we will probably will address that later on, but if we're talking about a certain community, it's very important for me to it is their identity, right? We have a certain identity to where we live and who we are and who are our comrades in that sense. So if
You
I
want
have
them to
to
express
address,
their
yeah, express
identity.
their identity, if I have to empower them
Mm-hmm.
as people with certain identity, then I have to look at this aspect of it. So I look at that, then social behavior comes into play, then that will start slowly generating a certain list of spaces that I need to consider. Then I make a list of it, then I start placing them on site, and I start playing with them more like building blocks. So I would place maybe like a living room here because this has a certain view to it, or this has a certain ventilation to it. I understand we use living rooms in the daytime, kitchen more often than not, bedrooms more towards the evening time we would spend. So then what would require more cooling, what time would you use a certain space, what time do you not use a certain space. So then it's a game of it's more like a SWOT analysis in that sense. If I place here, what is the strength, what is the opportunity, what is the weakness, all that sort of a thing. So I do iterations within the studio. We as a studio will have interactions with each other, have critical discussions about the plan, and then we zero in on something that we feel it works. And we're thinking, and it's not just plan, right? We're also thinking about material palette, we're thinking about the form, all of it. People generally assume that the first step is actually simpler, but the first step is the most crucial step, because once you get that right, then the rest of the steps follow
Okay.
suit. So we do that, we go back to the clients, have an interaction with them, show them the plan. So there's a structure to that entire process where we look at schematic design development, we look at sanctioning, which we have to look at the local sanctioning authority, then tender stage where we understand what is this going to cost us,
Yeah.
right? And what are the different components in the building in terms of material, what do we need to procure, how much does that cost, how much is the labor for that cost, all that. And then that helps the client or the contractor bring in teams with a certain skill set. Then we move on to construction drawing. So it's very very systematic in that sense, so that we are able to close on a lot of things in different stages, rather than have a very free flowing sort of organic system. I have a bit of a organized system.
Got it. So speaking of traditional buildings, like uh, it's really important to the balance, right? Like how do you put the ratio of tradition and innovation? So how do you balance between tradition and innovation?
So, tradition, see, we know certain cultural spaces that we require. The way people live in their homes, the way they use a living room, the way they use the kitchen. We know the pattern, the behavioral pattern, based on which we will look at the space. That is one thing. But another thing is the site itself presents opportunities, and when it does present opportunities, that's where we take advantage of those opportunities and come up with innovative solutions for certain things. So it really isn't so much of a balance. They go hand in hand, and in some sense they are actually parallels to each other, like they're independent of each other, but they go parallelly with each other. So yeah, I look at it like that.
So, what are the present trends in Tulu architecture? Are there any trends, and also the direction where it is going? And is there any vision that you have uh, for? I mean, like, yeah, would you like to change anything here, or change the way how it is going, or like, where is your contribution here? Like,
Okay. The way it's going, I am seeing a trend of people embracing their roots, and they do want traditional spaces now. I'm not entirely sure where that is sort of stemming from, but it's definitely a positive thing for me
okay,
because
it's gaining traction. You
it
mean?
is gaining traction. There are a lot of inquiries where people are already, exposed to the idea of using red oxide, for example, and they come to you with that. Instead of me pitching it and then convincing them, it's the other way around now, a lot of the times, which is great. Even for lime plaster, they're like, no, we know that there is an issue with your regular paint and cement plaster, so we would like lime plaster. So that really makes my job a hell of a lot easier because I don't have that whole requirement to sit with them and convince them, because that really takes some time. So that seems to be the trend. Of course, that being said, there is also a parallel trend where people are very interested in doing modernistic buildings for some reason, which I have nothing against. Maybe no, I'll correct myself. I think I might have something against it.
Okay.
Yeah, because I really think it's not the approach we should be taking. We're just going down the wrong road there. I'm not against tropical modern architecture. I think that is a good approach where they are trying to balance things. And like I said, when I said into your earlier question, where I said I'll study the location of the site. Now, if it's an urban space, I cannot propose chawadis and courtyards and
Yeah.
those sort of things. It's not a workable solution it works in a rural area, but not so much in an urban area. Now, if I were to design an urban area, I also have to understand the aspirations of the people and the local context and scenario and all of that.
Yeah.
Then automatically modernism will come into play. And like I said, I don't see the line between traditional and modern. Whoever is designing a building is still designing it for the modern person who is living in 2023. So he or she is still going to use the latest technology, is well informed, and their lifestyle is based on the society they live in. So the general trend has been that people are embracing their roots, let's say not roots, but I feel like there is a certain language that's developing, a certain local identity that's being born out of for many different reasons, due to many different factors. But I see that happening, and I'm quite
Great.
happy with that.
So before we move into your portfolio, there's a one last imaginary question I have. The question is that is it possible to build multi-storage buildings or big complexes in a Tulu architecture style?
That's where I'll have to innovate because I am actually proposing something which is G+4.
Okay, what is G+4?
G+4, what I mean by that is ground plus 4 floors
Okay.
for a building. And it is entirely possible. Not that it's not possible. It then becomes more to do with, I think, elements and the sense of aesthetics in the space. But it's possible. I mean,
Okay.
so
Using the same material, mud as the
mud, yes, but you'll have to
reinforce it with
reinforce
concrete
it
there
with
and
concrete post and beam system, and maybe build with mud for the infill walls as opposed to Ericon blocks. I don't only use mud, and to be honest, around here it's quite difficult to encourage people to use mud. So I am at the moment using laterite for the most part.
Okay.
But I would love to use mud in one of my projects. But
You need a solid research and material research.
material
science point
research
of view.
exists. That's not really a issue. The willingness of the people isn't. I mean, because they've lived in homes which are made of mud for long
Wouldn't you
enough.
like to build your own studio from out of mud?
I am planning on
You're
doing
planning
that.
to build a studio out of mud?
Yes.
Okay,
So that at least goes to prove to people that
Mud
listen.
sourced from the same place,
Yes,
or
yes.
bought it from somewhere
No,
else?
no, no, no.
Oh,
From the
that's
same
going to be
place.
beautiful. It's like solid extension from the ground itself.
Ground
right?
itself, where it stands.
Nice.
That is what I strongly believe in. Like buildings must be rooted in where they stand. Where they stand physically.
Nice.
It needs to belong there.
Okay.
Yeah.
You will be a first mover if you do so.
Yes.
Okay.
No,
One
there
of
are
the
people
first
doing
one.
it,
Okay.
but there are people doing it. I mean,
Great.
I wouldn't say that.
I would like to meet them and have a podcast,
I
mud
can
podcast.
put you in touch. Absolutely.
Muddy podcast.
Yeah, you can do that. No, absolutely. There are a lot of great people doing a lot of interesting projects. Honestly,